Okay, so it's always been a bit strange for me. I was talking yesterday to Paul and Diane about this. It's always been difficult for me to have this transition from Yom HaZikaron, which is, of course, a tragic day for us all. 26,000 people, soldiers have lost their lives in the wars for our country. Let me just turn that phone off. Right, let's take the batteries out so it can't ring again. So we go from Yom HaZikaron, which is a tragic day, and suddenly at 8 o'clock, when it's dark, suddenly, bang, we're into Yom Haatzmaut, which is such a celebration of our independence. And I've always found that very difficult indeed, to have this this emotional roller coaster, if you like. But I understand, of course, why it's there, because the truth is that without the Yom HaZikaron, there can never be a Yom Haatzmaut. It was only through the sacrifices of the people whose memory we preserve today that we can celebrate tomorrow Yom Haatzmaut. So they are absolutely intricately bound one with another, and we can't have one without the other. But nevertheless, I still find it a difficult task to move immediately and swiftly from the sad feeling of Yom HaZikaron to the happy feeling of Yom Haatzmaut. And I thought that perhaps in order to try and understand the concept of Yom Haatzmaut, the return to Zion, the return to Zion, Shivat Zion, in a way which makes Yom HaZikaron and Yom Haatzmaut come together, I thought that perhaps we would look together at the famous chapter of Yechezkel, the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 37, which you will all be familiar with. You'll all be familiar with the story, at least, if not the actual words. The chapter deals with the famous prophecy of Yechezkel about the coming together of dry bones, the valley of the dry bones. And we're going to go through it together shortly. For those of you who like to know these things, the first half of the chapter is the Haftarah for Parshat Parah, and the second half of the chapter is the Haftarah for Parshat Vayigash. And I'm going to share the screen with you in a moment, if I can just find it. There we go. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see Yechezkel chapter 37? Give me some nods, please, if you can see it. Yes, good, okay. Right, so Leon, let me unmute you. You're going to have a lot of reading to do, Leon, today, because it's a long chapter, but it's a fascinating story. I'm sure you'll be familiar with the story, but let's look at it in some detail. Let's look at the words that the prophet uses, and let's see what we can learn from it. So, Leon, off you go.
The hand of Hashem was upon me. It took me out by the Spirit of Hashem and set me down in the midst of the valley. And it was filled with bones. He passed me over them all around and around. And behold, they were very numerous upon the face of the valley. And behold, they were very dry. Then he said to me, Son of man, can these bones come to life? And I said, Lord Hashem Elohim, you know. He said to me,
Let's stop there a sec. This is a prophecy. Yechezkel was a prophet. We have to understand the historical background, as always. Yechezkel was a prophet who lived right at the end of the first temple era. He was part of the exile from Eretz Israel to Bavel by the Babylonians. He left before the destruction of the temple. Some years before the destruction of the temple, there was already an exile by the Babylonians. And you will be familiar with that because you will remember from just 6 weeks or so ago in Megillat Esther, we read about Mordechai. When we first encounter Mordechai, we are told that he was exiled with the exile of Yechoniah, who was the king, the king of Israel, the king of Judea at that time, and he was exiled before the destruction of the first temple. And Yechezkel, the prophet Yechezkel, was one of those who was exiled at that time, together with Mordechai, towards the end of the Second Temple era. And so this is a time when the Babylonians are in ascendancy. They are causing a great deal of strife to the Bnei Israel in Judea. And it's coming up to the time when the temple is going to be destroyed and the exile to Babylonia will be completed. And Yechezkel is giving this prophecy. And the first thing we have to note here is the two things that we have noted so far is that the bones were very numerous and very dry. And they're in a valley. They're this valley full of dry bones, and you imagine this picture of dry bones here in the valley that Yechezkel is in. And Hashem is with him. Hashem, as it were, brings him to this place, and he asks him a very strange question. He says, "Vayoma Eli," he said to me, "Ben Adam, human being. Is it possible that these dry bones could possibly come to life?" Clearly, that is Hashem's trick question to Yechezkel. He wasn't expecting Yechezkel to give him a straightforward answer. And I think Yechezkel answers correctly. And he says, "I don't know, you're God, you tell me." So let's hear what the prophecy is, Leon.
He said to me, "Prophesy over these bones. Say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Hashem. Thus said the Lord Hashem Elohim to these bones, Behold, I bring a spirit into you, and you will come to life. I will put sinews upon you. I will bring up flesh upon you, and I will coat you with skin. Then I will put a spirit into you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am Hashem." So I prophesied as I had been commanded. There was a sound as I was prophesying. Then behold, there was a noise, and the bones drew near, each bone to its matching bone.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. I meant to stop you before the last pasuk, actually, but I was busy writing something down. So Hashem says through Yechezkel, he says, let's have a look what he says. He says, number 1, verse 5, he says, "I will cause spirit to enter into you, and you shall live." And then he says, "I will lay sinews upon you. I will make flesh grow over you and cover you with skin. And then I will put breath into you, or spirit into you, and then you will know I am the Lord. So there seems to be a 4-stage process here. 4 stages. First of all, you get the spirit. Verse 5, you can see where my pointer is here. Ani mevivachem ruach. Ruach is a wind or a spirit. So the first thing is these bones are going to get a spirit. And then when they've got a spirit, they are going to come together and they're going to have flesh put on them, and they're going to be made into bodies. And then there's going to be another ruach. Look over here in verse 6. V'natati bachem ruach v'chitan. I'm going to bring a spirit into you. So is that either the first spirit again, or it's a second spirit? And then finally, ani vidatem ki ani Hashem. You will know that I am Hashem. So it's a 4-stage process that this is being described here. Firstly, a spirit. Secondly, a coming together of the bones and a building of the body. Thirdly, a spirit again being entered into this being. And fourthly and finally, that brings them to the knowledge of Hashem. And if we just run through the next few psukim quickly, you'll see exactly what happened. The noise, the bones came together, and then first verse 8, Leon.
Then I looked, and behold, upon them were sinews, and flesh had come up, and skin had covered them over, but there was no spirit in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the spirit. Prophesy, O Son of Man, and say to the spirit, thus said the Lord Hashem Elohim, come from the 4 directions, O Spirit, and blow into these slain people, that they may come to life. I prophesied as I had been commanded, and the Spirit entered them, and they came to life. They stood upon their feet, a very, very great legion. He said to me, Son of man, these bones, they are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they are saying, our bones are dried out, and our hope is lost. We are doomed.
Stop there.
Therefore,
let's stop there. Okay, so remember we had the 4 processes that Hashem said was going to happen. Spirit, rebuilding of the body, spirit again, and then you will know Hashem. But that isn't what happened, is it? If you actually look what happened, the bones came together, then the sinews and the flesh came over it. And then it says in verse 8, but there was still no spirit in them. So what happened? Where was that first spirit that Hashem said he would put into them? That's the first question. And then he says, okay, you, son of man, you are the one that has to put the spirit in. Look at verse 9. And then he said to me, prophesy to the spirit, prophesy, O son of man, and say to the spirit, so says Hashem, from 4 sides you should come and breathe into these slain ones. What's going on here? Why does Hashem say to the human being, to Yechezkel, you have to put the spirit into these into this thing that I've built? And so he did what he was told, and indeed they came to life, and it was a very great army. So we've got a few questions that the story is very clear. But what's going on with these words here that don't really seem to fit in? What, number 1, happened to the first spirit? Number 2, why did Hashem make Yechezkel put the spirits into them? And what's this business of the 4 sides from? Where's all that coming from? The 4 sides. The Hebrew says, Hashem Elokim me arba ruchot. The same word, ma'alba ruchot boi aruach. from all sides, from all the spirits. I have to bring this spirit. Where is all this leading us to? So let's just finish the first half of the chapter, and then we'll try and answer some of those questions. Verse 12.
Therefore, prophesy and say to them, thus saith the Lord Hashem Elohim, behold, I am opening your graves and raising you up from your graves, my people, and I will bring you to the soil of Israel. Then you will know that I am Hashem when I open your graves and when I raise you up from your graves, my people, and when I put my spirit into you and you come to life, and I set you on your soil. Then you will know that I am Hashem, that I, Hashem, have spoken and I have fulfilled the word of Hashem.
Okay, so that's the prophecy. Now, I don't have to point out to you, I'm sure, that the verses 11, 12, and 13 are so powerful when we think about our experiences in the setting up of Medinat Israel in 1948. I don't have to remind you of what went on between 1933 and even before and 1945. I don't have to remind you of the pictures that we all have seen many, many times and still have a tremendous effect on us, of the mass graves with bones, mere skeletons lying there of our people. I don't have to remind you of those things. And I don't have to remind you either that within 3 years of those photographs, we had Hakamat Hamdina, we had the establishment of the state. And if you only had 3 psukim, 3 verses to read of this prophecy, and you applied those 3 verses to our scenario in the 1940s, these would be them. Verse 11, 12, and 13. They need to be read again. These bones, these are the house of Israel. These bones, they're nothing but bones. Our bones are dried out. Va'avda tikvatenu. Avda tikvatenu. Can you see those words there where I'm pointing my arrow? Our hope is lost. Our hope is lost. Nigzarnu lanu. It's been decreed against us. We are desperate. Our bones are dried out. We are hopeless. We have no hope. Avda tikvatenu. You'll have heard those words before. Our hope is lost. And so, lachein hinaveh, go and prophesy, va'amarta aleim, and say to them, Ko amar Adonai Elohim, so says Hashem, Hinei ani poteach et kivrotechem, I'm going to open up your graves. V'ha'aleti etchem mikivrotechem, I'm going to elevate you. See the word aliyah in that word, v'ha'aleti, it's the same word as aliyah. I'm going to bring an aliyah to you from your graves. Ami, my people. V'heveti etchem, and I'm going to bring you. Where am I going to bring you? El Admat Yisrael, to the holy land, the ground of Israel. Vidatem, and then you shall know, Ki ani Hashem, that I am Hashem, b'pitchi et kivrotechem, when I open up your graves, uv'ha'aloti etchem mikivrotechem ami. And when I lift you out of your graves and I give you an aliyah and I bring you on aliyah from your graves, ami, my people. Those 3 verses very clearly describe the time between the end of the Holocaust and the Hakamat Medinat Israel, the establishment of the state of Israel. We heard on Sunday night from Howard the lengths and the efforts that Chaim Weizmann, Theodor Herzl, David Ben-Gurion, and a host of others who gave their lives to making this happen. But none of it would have happened without the prophecy of Yechezkel. And this prophecy of Yechezkel, which says that Hashem is going to take us from our graves and bring us up. And look at these words here that we said, that the people of Israel said, our bones are dried out. Now, let me tell you something, that when Yechezkel made this prophecy, he was not talking about his own time. By this time, there was not yet the destruction of the temple. The people were not in a situation of desperation. We know that because look at Megillat Esther. The people in Shushan, they were invited to the king's parties. Part of the problem was that they were too comfortable in Shushan, in Babylonia, in Persia, in Media, in the 127 provinces of Ahasuerus. This is the time we're talking about. This is a contemporary time. Yechezkel was not talking about his own time. He was talking about some time in the future. And of course, those who lived through the destruction of the first temple, those that lived through the destruction of the second temple will have recognized themselves in this prophecy. But nobody will have recognized themselves in this prophecy in the same way as, not my generation, it's a generation before me, those generations of the early part of the 20th century, the middle part of the 20th century, leading up to the establishment of the State of Israel. Those three verses tell us very clearly Yechezkel was giving us a prophecy some 3,000 years into the future. He was giving us a prophecy of such clarity that it was only when we saw that those things happen that we could look back at this verse, these verses, this chapter of Yechezkel, and say, now I know what he's talking about. But that means that we have to look at all of it. We can't just look at it and say we were lost and HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us up here, because there is another bit. Let's just go back and see if we can make some sense of what was going on before. I said to you before that the first thing was a spirit, and it seemed to be missing. There was no spirit. I'd like to suggest to you that everything that we heard from Howard on Sunday night, all those amazing efforts and lifelong work that the Zionists and the proto-Zionists made to make it happen in the physical world, that was the spirit that Yechezkel was referring to when he made this prophecy. The first spirit that seems to be missing in the dry bones, because by the time those dry bones had happened, and by the time that we were into that terrible situation, those people had no spirit. But Baruch Hashem, the spirit which he was talking about here, and he says in verse 5, the first thing he says, Ko amar Hashem Elokim latzamot ha'ela, hinei ani mevi bachem ruach, I'm going to bring you a spirit. He brought us these men of spirit. He brought us these people who had the spirit of God in them, the spirit of Tanakh in them. They had inside of them, they had the Ruach Hashem. They had the spirit of Yechezkel. They had inside of them all this knowledge, every single one of them, whether they were religious, whether they were observant or they were not. Every single one of them knew their Tanakh inside out. Ben Gurion could quote you Tanakh from beginning to end. You could say a pasuk, he would tell you the first one, the last one, before it, after it. Same with Menachem Begin. He lived for Tanakh. Menachem Begin had Tanakh running through his veins, as did all of these people. I'm sure Chaim Weizmann was the same. these people couldn't do what they had done without living the Tanakh, without having this Tanakh running through their veins. So this spirit of verse 5 here that Hashem is speaking about, this is the spirit that they had to bring about the tremendous changes, the tremendous revolutions that went on in the late 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, all the way up to the beginning of the state, and immediately afterwards, of course, the War of Independence, where we lost so many brave men and women. So that's the first spirit. So the spirit is missing here in the Pasuk only because he's talking to the bones. But he says, I'm going to bring the spirit. And he brought that spirit. He brought that spirit through human beings, through those very, very special human beings for whom we have to have the most amazing respect and gratitude. And the next thing I want to point out to you is that a strange thing we said before, that Hashem says to Yechezkel, he says, son of man, I'm in verse 9 over here, Vayomer Eli, he said to me, Hinavei al ruach, you prophesy to this spirit. Hinavei ben Adam, son of man, you have to do this prophesying. Ve'amarta el ruach, and you say to the spirit, Kama Hashem Elokim arba ruchot boi ruach. From all four sides, I'm going to bring this ruach. What's he talking about from all four sides? Four sides of what? He's talking here about the four sides, the four corners of the earth. He's talking about kibbutz galuyot. He's talking here about the ingathering of the exiles. We were dispersed in the exile of Babylonia. We were exiled to Bavel largely, but we also, some of them went west. I think Howard mentioned it on Sunday night as well, that some of the people had gone west. Oh no, maybe it was I was talking about it when we were talking about the Phoenicians. Anyway, the exile was not just to Bavel. And when we went, and the second exile after the second temple was destroyed, we were taken to Rome. And from there, we went, from Italy, we went through to Europe. We ended up in Eastern Europe. We ended up in Central Europe, in Western Europe. Eventually, we ended up over in the New World. We went to all four corners of the earth. But that was only 2 tribes, or 2.5 tribes. Yehudah, Binyamin, and some of the tribe of Levi. What happened to the 10 tribes? What happened to the other 10 tribes? We know what happened to them because we're going to learn it when we come through to Sefer Melachim. After the death of Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, the kingdom split into the northern kingdom of Israel or Samaria and the southern kingdom of Judea. The Assyrians came 150 years before the destruction of the first temple. There was the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel, and the 10 tribes were exiled, and they became known to us as the lost 10 tribes, or the 10 lost tribes. And what has happened since Hakamat Medinat Israel, since the establishment of the state of Israel, is that we have started to bring back the 10 lost tribes. We've started to bring back not only those tribes of ours, of Yehudim, of Jews from the tribe of Yehudah. Binyamin got fused into Yehudah. We are Yehudim. We are the tribe of Yehudah. But there are another 10 tribes out there, and we've started the process. And the reason that Hashem says to Yechezkel, you, Bnei Adam, Ben Adam, human being, you have to bring this about. You have to bring the spirit back from the four corners of the earth. It's your job as a human being, as a part of the nation of Israel, to go out to the four corners of the earth and bring back those lost tribes. Because only when those lost tribes all come back to the land of Israel will the Geula, the redemption, be complete. We have made a massive step towards the redemption, towards this prophecy of Yechezkel. We have had the spirit of the Zionists to bring about the state of Israel from a political perspective. We've had the efforts of people like Danny Limor, who we all heard, and those of you that didn't hear should make it your business to hear it. His talks about how he was part of the wonderful bringing back of the Ethiopian tribe of Jews. He's now involved in bringing back further tribes in Africa and in South America. And this work is still going on. It's a work in process. This prophecy of Yechezkel is being fulfilled in our days. Those of you who are older than 1948 vintage can say that most of this prophecy was in your days. But even me, who was born after 1948, this prophecy is still happening. Yechezkel's prophecy is coming to fruition. There are people of spirit like Yechezkel, like Danny Limor, and all the people with him who are doing these things, who are bringing back these 10 lost tribes. And then when we have the 10 lost tribes back, when we have everybody back, then we will have verse 10. And I prophesied, says Yechezkel, Kasher tzivani, as God has commanded me. Vatabo bahem haruach. Yes, the spirit will come to them. Which spirit are we talking about? The spirit of mankind, the spirit that Hashem gives to these people, to these very special people, the people who made it happen in the first place, the people who are still making it happen, and the people who gave their lives so that it should carry on happening. The people that gave their lives, that we on Yom HaZikaron, we've got a few more hours left to commemorate these people who gave their lives throughout all the wars of Israel, throughout all the terrorist actions that happened. All these people, these are the people of spirit. This is what Yechezkel is talking about. These are the people who come from all four sides. And another way of looking at this is if you look at the makeup of the 26,000 and however many Kedoshim, holy ones, who gave their lives for the state of Israel, they come from all four corners of the earth. Jews from everywhere came to the land, became citizens. If they didn't go to war, their children went to war. And these are people who've come from all four sides of the earth. This is the prophecy of Yechezkel taking place in our lifetime. And we must never, ever forget how fortunate we are to be living in a time, in a generation, which people have yearned for not just 2,000 years since the destruction of the Second Temple, but 3,000 years since the time of Shlomo HaMelech, since the time after Shlomo HaMelech when the kingdom split. Since that time, we have been a nation yearning to come back together again and to be sovereign in our own land with all our people. And we are witnessing it in our generation, in our day. And this is the prophecy of Yechezkel. Now, at the end of all of this, the fourth part of the prophecy was here, verse 6, the end of verse 6. You'll have the sinews upon you, I'll make your flesh grow over you, I'll cover you with skin. That means quite clearly those living skeletons, those barely living skeletons of Nitzolei Shoah, of the survivors of the Holocaust that came to this country. And within 5 minutes of arriving, a rifle was stuck in their hand, and they had to start fighting for their own survival yet again. Those people that were barely skin and bone, certainly no flesh. We've had that. That flesh has been put upon them. Look at the wealth that we have in this country. Look at what a standard of living we all have. We know that there are people still living in poverty, and we have to rectify that. Particularly those Holocaust survivors who are living in poverty. That's absolutely a shame on us. But nevertheless, look at the bigger picture. Those skeletons have had the sinews and the flesh put upon them. They've come from all four sides, like this pasuk says. And then then the breath was put into them, the spirit was put into them. What does that mean? It means that they had their lives given back to them. These people were broken. They were broken not just physically, but they were broken psychologically. They were broken spiritually. How did we hear? We heard from the Rav on his shiur on Yom HaShoah. He read the words of Viktor Frankl, the words of Elie Wiesel, the words of Primo Levi, of how broken these people were. And here the prophecy is in verse 6, I'll bring you back to life, not just physically, but spiritually as well. And then, only then, Vidatem ki ani Hashem, then you will know that I am Hashem. The spirit of Hashem, which means the learning of Torah, the keeping of the mitzvot, the living a life as we are doing here in Eretz Israel, living the festivals, living Shabbat, living Shemitah, living all the things that we can do in Eretz Israel, taking Truma, taking Maaser, saying the bracha for the blossom in Nisan that we did just a few weeks ago. All of those things, that means Vidatem ki ani Hashem. That means knowing that we are Hashem. Why are we all so fed up here being stuck in our houses? Because we want to go out. But where do we want to go out? Where do we want to go? We want to go shul. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, when are you going to open up the shul? I can't wait to get back to the shul. Because that's our ruach. That's our breath that's inside of us. Howard spoke about the Uganda proposal. Baruch Hashem, it was rejected because Uganda is not Israel. Israel is a holy land. We are living the dream. We are living not just the dream, we're living the prophecy of Yechezkel. And I just want to spend the last few minutes proving to you from Yechezkel himself that we have a responsibility to complete the job. The job is only half done. And I don't mean that we have to go out and build the third Beit HaMikdash right now. We're not ready for that yet. The job is only half done because we have not yet done the full job of Kibbutz Galuyot. Up until now in this chapter, we've been reading the Haftarah of Parshat Parah, which deals about the Parah Aduma, which purifies the unclean people from Tamei Met, if they're ritually unclean from death. But the next part of the chapter, starting in chapter 15, talks about, in absolute clarity, you're going to hear Leon read it now, in absolute clarity, it speaks about Kibbutz Galuyot, the bringing together of our nation. And it means not just the Yehudim, it specifically means the 10 lost tribes. Let's read it. Leon, verse 15 onwards, please.
The word of Hashem came to me, saying, Now you, son of man, take for yourself one piece of wood and write upon it, for Judah and for the children of Israel, his comrades. And take one piece of wood and write upon it, for Joseph, the wood of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel, his comrades. Then bring them close to yourself, one to the other, like one piece of wood.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there. So So this is a second prophecy. Immediately after the resurrection of the bones, immediately after Hashem has said he's going to bring us back to life. He's obviously there. We're referring here to the tragedy of the Holocaust. He's going to bring us back to life, and he's going to bring us back to the land. The very next thing that Yechezkel says has another prophecy. Take a stick and write on it Yehuda. Yehuda. And take another stick and write Yosef. Yehuda and Yosef. And he calls it Eitz Ephraim over here. Eitz Ephraim, verse 16, where my pointer is here. Eitz Ephraim, the tree, the stick, the wood of Ephraim. Who was the leader of the 10 tribes, the 10 lost tribes? Who was responsible for the split between Judea, Yehuda, and Israel? Was Ephraim. Ephraim was the leader of the 10 tribes. Yosef and Yehuda were always those who were going to be challenged one another. They were the ones that were always in conflict with one another. Think about the brothers. Who was the one that wanted to throw Yosef into the pit? Yehuda. Who was the one that approached Yosef at the end and did teshuvah and said, okay, don't let Binyamin be a slave, take me instead? Yehuda. This has always been a battle between Yehuda and Yosef, Yehuda and Ephraim. We speak about Mashiach. We know that Mashiach, the Messiah, Mashiach, is Mashiach ben David from the tribe of Yehuda. But there's another Mashiach. There's a Mashiach ben Yosef, who will, the prophets tell us the Mashiach ben Yosef will precede Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben Yosef will come first. And in fact, if you look in the writings of Rav Kook, who was the first Ashkenaz chief rabbi of the Yishuv in the early part of the 20th century, he was renowned for his relationships with the secular Jews. Most of the other Rabbanim, most of the other spiritual leaders rejected the secular Zionists, those who had come in the first Yishuv and the second Yishuv to work the land. They were rejected. To be fair, it was mutual. The Yishuvniks also rejected the rabbis and rejected Judaism. Rav Kook said no. Rav Kook famously went to Zichron Yaakov, where they were working in the fields and the vineyards there. And he said to these people, he came up there in all his glory with his Bekisha and his Shpodak, and he came to them and he said, you are the people who are bringing Mashiach. You are Mashiach ben Yosef. You, the workers of the land, we need you first. And then it will be up to us to then bring Mashiach ben David, because we will bring the Spirit after that. But without you, we can't do it. So this prophecy of Yechezkel is a dual prophecy. It's talking about the split of the kingdom and bringing back together these two sticks, the stick of Yehuda, the stick of Ephraim, and bringing them together and making them to one stick. We don't want two kingdoms anymore. We want one kingdom. We want everybody to come in to be one part of the house of Israel. Look at the words carefully. He says, write upon Yehuda's stick for Yehuda and Bnei Israel, and write upon Yosef's stick, Eitz Ephraim, the tree or the stick of Ephraim, V'chol Beit Israel, and all the house of Israel. It uses the word Yisrael for both of them. We're both parts of Bnei Israel. We do not have a monopoly on Bnei Israel. We may be Yehudim, but we are part of Israel. Ephraim, those 10 lost tribes, are part of Israel, and we must bring them back together again. But it's not just the tribes we're talking about. We're talking about what they represent. Rav Kook said that Ephraim is represented by the secular Jews, the ones that put their guts and their blood, sweat, and tears into building the land. They are Ephraim. We, Yehuda, we are the Ben David. We are the ones that will be Datem Hashem. We were the ones that are meant to know Hashem. We're meant to bring the spirit of Hashem. But we can't have one without the other. It doesn't work. This is a plea by Hashem through the prophecy of Yechezkel for unity amongst Bnei Yisrael, unity amongst the Jews, the Yehudim, between the secular and the religious, and a plea for unity between Bnei Yehuda and Bnei Ephraim. And let's just read on and see what happens. Carry on, Leon. Verse 18.
Now, when the children of your people say to you, saying, will you not tell us what these things are to you? Say to them, thus said the Lord Hashem Elohim, behold, I am taking the wood of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his comrades, and I am placing them and him together with the wood of Judah, and I will make them into one piece of wood, and they will become one in my hand. The pieces of wood upon which you will write shall be in your hand, before their eyes. Say to them, thus said the Lord Hashem Elohim, behold, I am taking the children of Israel from among the nations to which they have gone. I will gather them from all around, and I will bring them to their soil.
Stop there
I
for
will
a
make
sec.
them.
Stop there for a sec, Leon. So let's look at that last pasuk, verse 21. So says Hashem, I will take the children of Israel. Ani lokech et bnei Yisrael. Doesn't say bnei Yehuda. Says bnei Yisrael. Mi bein hagoyim. I'll take them from all those places where they've gone to. Asher halchu sham, where they went. V'kibatzti otam. I will gather them. The word kibbutz means to be gathered together. It means to come together as one. I will gather them misaviv, from all around, v'heveti otam el admatam, to their land. This land belongs to the whole of Bnei Yisrael. Carry on. Verse 22.
I will make them into one nation in the land, upon mountains of Israel, and one king will be a king for them all. They will no longer be two nations, and they will no longer be divided into two kingdoms ever again.
So there you have it, as plain as the words in the text. Yechezkel is giving us a prophecy. We'll go right back to the beginning. He's giving a prophecy. I'm going to bring you a man of spirit. I'm going to bring you men of spirit. I'm going to imbuing these people the strength and the vision to work towards bringing back my people to the land. At a time when they are dry bones, they have got more than 1 foot in the grave. They've got 1 7/8 foot in the grave. I'm going to take them. I'm going to make them with sinews and flesh again. And I'm going to bring them spirit to them from everywhere. And I'm going to bring them back to this land. And then, when I've done all that, you, Bnei Adam, have got a job to do. You have got to take the stick of Yehuda, the stick of Ephraim, and you've got to bring them together. You have to have unity. And only when you have unity, at that point, then you will be able to say, Vidatem ki ani Hashem. Then you will know that I am Hashem. We are a work in progress. We are a people who our generation are the fortunate ones to be here at the time, the greatest time in 3,000 years of Jewish history. Literally, that's not an exaggeration. The greatest time in Jewish history since King Solomon. And we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility on an individual level that every single Jew, whether he's secular, whether he's Dati Leumi, whether he is Haredi, we might not like everything that everybody does, but we have a duty to remember that we are all one stick. We are the stick of Yehuda and we are the stick of Ephraim. Whether they're secular, whether they're religious, whether they're Haredi, whether they're Sephardi, whether they're Ashkenaz, whether they're Taimani, whether they're Ethiopian, whether they're Indian, whatever they are all part of the stick that Yechezkel says we have to put back together again. That's our responsibility on an individual level. On a communal level, we have a responsibility to make sure that all of us are as one family. We have done our very, very best, I think, in this hard times to be one family, but let's not forget it. Let's not forget it when we're allowed out again. Let's remember how unpleasant it has been for us to be stuck in on our own. And let's remember that there are people in our community who are on their own because they live on their own and they perhaps don't have family close by and they don't have a spouse or children nearby them. Let's make sure that there is nobody left on their own. Nobody should celebrate Shabbat on their own unless they want to. Nobody should be on their own for the Chagim. That's our responsibility as a community. And as a nation, we have a responsibility. I suppose our responsibility is to elect leaders who will be worthy of this pasuk over here, which Leon just read out. Where are we? Yes, I will make them into one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be able to be them as a king, and they shall no longer be two nations. They shall no longer be divided into kingdoms anymore. We have a responsibility to try and find leaders, and the leaders have that responsibility to be those people, to bring about the final conclusion of Yechezkel's prophecy. But we have to know that we are part of this prophecy. We are living Tanakh. Anybody that says to you that Tanakh is an old book of no consequence to modern day, just show them Yechezkel chapter 37 and show them that the Tanakh lives and it lives through us, and we have a responsibility now to go ahead and fulfill and complete the prophecy of Yechezkel, and remembering at the same time all the people that have gone on before us, which is the end of Yom HaZikaron now. Let's remember those people who've sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice so that we can be here and we can benefit from their sacrifice. And let's make sure that we ourselves do our own bit. Thankfully, we've not been called as yet. Please God, we'll never be called to make that ultimate sacrifice. But nevertheless, we've got a job to do. We have to make sure that we can be as unified as possible and be fulfilled for the prophecy of Yechezkel. So I'm now going to unmute you, and you can all have your 2 penneth worth. If I can do it. There we go. You all unmuted.
Brilliant, Johnny. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
Marvelous. Marvelous.
Half an hour's time. Stop recording now. Stop recording. Half an hour.